Welcome to the Living Well Church podcast, and thanks for tuning in today. Our mission as a church is to help people find faith in Jesus and a life of purpose and hope. You're about to watch a message that will challenge you, inspire you, encourage you, and most of all, point you to Jesus and the life of purpose and hope He has planned for you. So lean in and enjoy, and let God speak into your life.
Okay, I have got the privilege of finishing our series on Blessed are the Persecuted, on the Beatitudes, and I'm speaking on verse 10 of Matthew chapter 5, which is Blessed are those who are persecuted. I'll just read the whole verse to you before I start, and it says, Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Now, in order to look at this verse, in order to kind of understand it in greater detail, I want to look at a story in the Old Testament, and it's about a prophet called Elijah. And just to give you a bit of context before I start, it's found in 1 Kings chapter 18, if you've got your Bibles with you. What happens is Elijah hears from God that he's to go to a land called Samaria. And in Samaria at the time there's great famine, but it's also run by a chap called Ahab. And Ahab is married to someone called Jezebel. And Jezebel worships a different god called Baal. And because of this, she has been persecuting Christians. And in a cave in Samaria, there have been 100 prophets hiding. And another prophet called Obadiah is keeping them alive, giving them bread and water. And into this situation, we have Elijah enter. Now, there's a lot of reading, first of all, so forgive me for that, but I'll try and make it interesting. I'm starting from 1 Kings 18, verse 16. It says, So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, Is that you troubler of Israel? I have not made trouble for Israel, Elijah replied, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed Baal. Now summon the people over to Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and 450 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him. But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let them choose one for themselves, and they cut it into pieces and put it on wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on wood and not set fire to it. Then you call the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. Then all the people said, What you say is good. So Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given to them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Oh, Baal, answer us, they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered, and they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping, and he must be awakened. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued in their frantic prophesying until the time for evening sacrifice. There was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, Come here to me. They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which was in ruins. Elijah took 12 stones, one of each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, Your name shall be Israel. With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench round it, large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Do it again, he said, and they did it again. Do it a third time, he ordered, and they did it a third time. The water ran down the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and it also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. You know, I absolutely love this story because Elijah has just got this crazy, insane faith. And let's just put it into some modern day context or equivalence for us to understand how crazy that faith is. Now, first and foremost, we know at the moment that Christians are being persecuted all the way around the world. You know, in Iraq in 2003, there were 1.56 million Christians. Now today, there are only 300,000 due to how many were killed and persecuted. You know, in Syria, over the last 6 months, they estimate about 500,000 Christians have been persecuted or have had to flee that land due to persecution. We know that there are places we can go to in this world where Christians are being persecuted. And Elijah is exactly the same at this point in Samaria. And he knows that there were Israelites, people, believers, followers of God, hiding in a cave. And Elijah decides, you know, God calls him together and he goes, I'll go there. I'll go to that land where my people are being persecuted. Can you imagine, just put yourselves in that shoes for a second, can you imagine yourself going to one of those places where you know Christians being persecuted? Then Elijah when he gets there, he goes, Obadiah, tell Ahab, the ruler, who has been persecuting all the other people that believe the same belief that I do, that follow God, tell him that I'm here. So imagine going to a land where you know other Christians are being persecuted, rocking up and saying, the leader of these people that believe in a different God that have been killing the Christians, can someone tell him that I'm here? What crazy faith. And then Elijah takes it one step further in his insane faith and goes, Ahab, I'm the only prophet left, and you've got 450 prophets of Baal. Let's go up a mountain together. Could you imagine going to a country where Christians are being persecuted, finding out the ruler who is in charge of the persecution of your people, and then get 450 of those leaders, 450 of the people that have been persecuting Christians, and let me go up a mountain with them? Can you imagine? That is just, for me, that is just crazy, insane faith. And then Elijah does this wonderful showdown of, hey, let me show you my God, and you show me your God. What faith! And there is a challenge right at the beginning for us here. There is a challenge, right at the beginning of this series, when I spoke on Poor in Spirit, I talked about going up the mountain a little bit. That right at the beginning of the Beatitudes, at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus goes up the mountain a little bit. In order to draw closer to him, the disciples follow him. And they take those steps closer towards Jesus up the mountain. And here, we've got some prophets hiding in the cave. 100 followers of God hiding in a cave. But we've got Elijah stepping out and going up a mountain and going, hey, you want to see my God? And there's a challenge there for us. There's a challenge there for the church about where are we? Are we hiding in the cave? Are we doing our activity in the cave? Are we following God in the cave? Are we worshipping and praying in the cave? Or do we have the boldness? Do we have the faith, even just faith of a mustard seed, just to go up the mountain and say to the rest of the world, hey, do you want to see my God? Because I think there's a poignancy, particularly this week, with what we've been reading about, what you see consistently. You can't avoid what's happening in Syria at the moment. I think there is a poignancy, and there is a moment and there is a time for the church now to be getting up, getting out of the cave, standing up and standing and saying, hey, world, do you want to see my God? And we need to be doing this because we know, and the reason why we need to be doing this is because I want to ask you personally, and just to challenge you, has your faith, has your spiritual journey changed at all since you've known that there are brothers and sisters being persecuted? Since the persecution in those countries in the Middle East has increased, has your faith changed at all? Because it says really clearly in the Bible, in 1 Corinthians 12, it talks about the church as a body. And it says in verse 26, when one part suffers, we all suffer. When one part is glad, then we all rejoice. And I just want to use my mum. She's a great illustration of this. Some of you know her, some of you don't, but she has had recently, in the past few years, an operation on her arm. Because it's really weak. It's kind of, I don't really understand, but basically it's like detached to the body. And she's had to have metal screws and things in place to actually literally keep the arm part of the body. This arm is exceptionally weak for my mum. Those of you who know her will know the answer to this question of, has that stopped her from doing anything? No. My son isn't the slimmest of sons. And yet my mum will just still pick him up just with one arm. My mum loves horses. She's got horses and she will still ride. She will still lead them, but just with one arm. She will still drive. She will still cook. She will still carry in the shopping, all just with one arm. It has not made a difference to her day-to-day life. The difference that's happened is this arm has got stronger because this arm is weaker. And if we are really the body of Christ, there is an arm out there which is exceptionally weak because it's being persecuted on a day-to-day basis. We have the freedom of going out of the cave, up the mountain. We are not oppressed in this land. And so this arm of the church, should be getting stronger. And it says that in the Bible. It declares it in the Bible. It demands it in the Bible because it says, let your light shine. And I won't take too much of it because I know Jez is preaching on it later, but after the Sermon on the Mount, it says in verse 14 of chapter 5 in Matthew, you are the light of the world, a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives it light to everyone around in the house. And in the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. We are called to be a light in this world. Katie, a few weeks ago, talked about from Philippians, shining like stars in this crooked and depraved generation. One part of our brothers and sisters is weak. They are surrounded by darkness. And so we, in response, should be stronger and shining the light. I don't think it's any coincidence that when Elijah is up that mountain, he asked for God to send his fire. He asked for God to send this light on the altar, and it licks up everything. It even licks up the water. And we need to radiate that. We need to get out of the cave, walk up the mountain, and radiate God's light. It's funny. I love the way how things go round and round. But in Acts 8, Samaria is under persecution again. And I'll just read you this and then I'll make my point. It says, on a day, a great persecution broke out against the church at Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. But Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off men and women and put them in prison. Those who had been scattered preached the word wherever they went. Philip went down to the city in Samaria and proclaimed Christ there. When the crowds heard Philip and saw the miraculous signs he did, they paid close attention to what he said. With shrieks, evil spirits came out of many, and many paralytics and cripples were healed. So there was great joy in the city. You know, hundreds of years later, there is still persecution in the same place. And Philip's response is, just like Elijah, getting up that mountain and saying, hey, do you want to see my God? You know, it is time to let our light shine, and it is time as well just to stop being nice. To stop just doing nice things. Because nice isn't going to tell the rest of the world that, hey, our God is here. I don't mean we should be nasty to other people, but just work with me and hold with me what I'm saying here a second. You know, Jesus, when he saw the lame, when he saw the beggar, didn't just give him bread to eat. He healed him. When Jesus saw the blind, he didn't just put his arm around him and said, oh, let's have a nice chat. He healed him. When Jesus saw the lady of Samaria by the well, he didn't just give her a water to drink to quench her thirst. He prophesied into her situation. And so day to day, Jesus, everywhere he went, do you want to see my God? I can show you my God. And you know, Marcus spoke a couple of weeks ago about telling our neighbours about Jesus. And yes, definitely we should. But I want to up the ante. I want us to be like Elijah. I want us to be like Philip. And I want us to go to our neighbours and go, do you want us to show us your God, our God? Are you healing? Do you want me to show you my God? Are you hurting? Do you want me to show you our God? Because you know, Jesus commands us to heal, to bind up broken hearts, to set captives free. You know, and a great story, we've heard a great story in our church, a testimony like this. Nathan, he's not here tonight, I don't think. I can't tell, it's really dark. But Nathan told us a story, and I've heard it a couple of times now, of someone in his work, a lady in his work, who was in a really bad situation. She was quite a desperate state, and she had this list, a list of everything that she had to be done over a weekend. And Nathan went up to her, and he was like, oh, are you okay? And she was like, yeah, I've got all this to do over the weekend. You know what? Nathan just took the list, and he prayed for all of those things on that list to be done. Nathan took that list and he said, I'll show you what my God can do. You know, in the day-to-day, in our workplaces, to the people we meet, to the friends we have, to our family, we can take their lists and we can say, I will show you what my God can do. We need to let our light shine. We need to go up the mountain. We need to be like Elijah and say, hey, you want to see my God? And why? You know, in order to do that, in order to have that kind of, those guts, that gumption that Elijah has to do that, there's got to be a motive. And our motive very simply is love. You know, later in Matthew 5, verse 44, Jesus commands us to love our enemies. And that's hard. You know, when I think of what people do, what persecutors do to the Christians in other places, what they do to the babies there, what they do to the women there, what they do to the families there, it makes me sick. It makes me disgusted. And being honest with you, church, it makes me want revenge. But Jesus comes and he says, we are to love them. And in Romans 12, it says we are to pray for those that persecute us. So we are to love them and we are to pray for them. And that is a hard thing to do. But if we don't show them Jesus, what is the answer? You know, Elijah, the end of this story, they fall prostrate on the floor and they recognize that God is God. It is time for the world to see that our God is God. Because otherwise, if we as the church don't get off our butts, if we don't get out of the cave, if we don't climb the mountains and do this, then actually what we are doing to the persecutors and the persecuted, but also to the persecutors, is that actually, by not showing them our God, we are condemning them for a life of eternal persecution. Because they're going to hell. And so we are to love them. And we are to pray for them. And we are to pray that hopefully one day, do you know what, they will know Jesus. And I love the story of Philip there in Acts, because the person who was responsible for the persecution is Saul. And you know what? I thank God for the people that prayed for Saul. I thank God for the people that loved Saul. Thank God for the person, I think it was Ananias, looking for some confirmation, who took Saul in through Jesus, through God's command, after Saul had that conversion experience. I thank God that he loved him still. Because we know what happened to Saul. He became Paul. And so it's time to let our light shine, to climb up the mountain, say to the rest of the world, hey, you want to see my God? To pray for those persecutors in the hope that we will know testimonies of the leaders of those 450 prophets of Baal lying prostrate on the floor, confessing that God is God, that those leaders of the other country who are persecuting our brothers and sisters will one day lie prostrate on the floor, confessing that God is God, that we will see Sauls turning into Pauls. Because at the bottom line, our God reigns, and he can do that. And as we begin to see in our day-to-day life, as we begin to get out of the cave and go up the mountain, we will begin to recognize what our God can do. The insane, uncontrollable power that God has. I look at Elijah and I think, how do you have that faith? That insane faith to go to that country, to say to Ahab that he wants to meet him, to go up to that mountain, and then also, Elijah just kind of puts the icing on the cake. When the prophets of Baal are all screaming to their God, Elijah stands there and he's like, oh, is he asleep? Oh, maybe he needs to shout louder because maybe he's waking up, or maybe he's gone traveling. In the ESV version of the Bible, Elijah actually says, is he relieving himself? I love that line. Is your God relieving himself? He is so indignant. He's almost so rude with his faith. Because he's so certain that his God reigns. He's so certain that God is real. And I wonder, and I look at that and I'm like, how do you know that? Before that happens in Elijah's life, there are other things, there are little things that happen. Before that meeting, he spends a time with a widow in Zarephath. And she has only this tiny bit of oil and this tiny bit of flour. And Elijah goes and he asks her for food. And the widow turns around and says, oh, I've only got this tiny bit of oil and this tiny bit of flour. And he's like, do you know what, it'd be fine. And she makes him this bread. Obviously, this is the Beth Boxall's condensed version of the Bible right now, by the way. Just don't take it kind of line by line. And she bakes him this bread. And then the oil in the jar never runs out. The flour in the jar never runs out. He sees God. He sees the fire of God come in this massive way on the mountain, but he also sees it coming in the day-to-day. We've got to be a people that see God coming on the day-to-day. Because as we see God, as we see him, we will realize what a privilege it is to serve him. What a privilege it is to be part of his huge kingdom plan. And the privilege, when it comes to it, when we're then in the face of the persecution, when there is that time to get out of the cave and go up the mountain, we will know, actually, do you know what? The privilege outweighs the persecution. And when we start thinking like that, when I begin to think like that, I understand something. Not all of it, but I understand something of when the apostles in Acts 5 come out of the Sanhedrin after they've been beaten. And they kind of worship God, thanking him that they are considered worthy to be persecuted for him. I also understand a bit when James talks at the beginning of in James 1, when he says, consider it pure joy when you face trials in your life because of me. Consider it pure joy. And the only thing that I can kind of equate that to try and understand it, and don't laugh at me here, it was the best kind of metaphor I could think of, was labour. You know, I had 36 hours of labour. And there were times, I've got to be careful what I say, because there's someone here that's about to go into labour any second. But there were some parts of it which were painful. And yet, being really honest with you, yes, there were parts of it which were painful. I had 36 hours of that pain. And yet, the utter joy thinking that I'm about to meet my son made that pain so worth it. The utter joy of knowing I am about to hold my son, somebody who God has knitted together in my womb, in my arms, that joy outweighed the trial. The privilege of bringing that son into this world outweighed the pain. And you know, when we consider how mighty, how awesome our God is, when we see him working in our lives, and we think that one day we are going to be face to face with him, that joy of meeting our Heavenly Father will outweigh the trials. That joy of seeing him and looking him face to face will outweigh the pain. And now I'm not diminishing persecution here by any means. Please don't misinterpret me. I'm not diminishing it. But I am saying, when we see our God, we know what a privilege it is to be serving him. And when we meet him in heaven, that eternal destination, I'm convinced that we will know that whatever trials we faced in this life, it was worth it. And you know, when we then begin to understand what Paul says, when he says to live is for Christ and to die is the gain. You know, that we live in this world, in this fleeting, temporary world, we live it for Christ. But to die, that's the gain because we're just with our Father. And that is a profound, huge, weighty statement that I'm still trying to get my head around. You know, I'm not there yet. I'm not Elijah. I'm not Philip. But I hope to have something of that. I hope to have a glimmer of that. And just to wrap this all up together, what I really want to say, and what's the kind of whole thrust of the message, is basically, just like Elijah, are we building an altar? Are we surrendering our lives, surrendering everything on that altar? Ready and waiting for God to show up whenever he wants to in our day-to-day life, to say to the rest of the world, hey, here is my God. Because if we do that as a collective church, people are going to start to see the church in England move. People are going to begin to wonder, hey, what's happening to that church in England? And the answer to that will be God. God's fire is what's happening to that church in England. But we need to be receptive. Our altars need to be ready. And we need to be out of the cave and up the mountain waiting for that.